For the first installment of the Roots series, we're starting in the beginning with specifically the first 3 chapters in Genesis. And we're choosing to start in the beginning, not just because it's the beginning, but because we feel like it's going to pay off in 2 important ways for us. First, it's going to help explain the rest of the book. There are about 4 events that happen in Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3 that seem to set the tone for the rest of the story and the rest of the Bible. In fact, you can go back and find that much of what happens later in the scripture is either a response to, some attempt to redeem, or some explanation of the things that we're studying in Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. So we're starting in the beginning because it'll set up the rest of the book, and we're starting in the beginning because it will not only help us understand the Bible, but the first 3 chapters of Genesis actually have the potential to help us understand ourselves. Since we've been talking and thinking in these terms, I find myself at least once or twice a week saying this: well, whatever that is, it goes straight back to the garden. I'll be having a conversation with myself, which I do with some regularity, or with other people, or I'll be watching the news, and I'll hear somebody talk about loneliness, or a desire for companionship, or wrestling with shame and guilt and fear, or trying to break through the barriers of hiding and interpersonal relationships, or a desire for purpose. And I'll say, you know what? Man, that stuff goes straight back to Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. And so that's why we're spending time there. Now, for the past 2 weeks, we've been tracing our roots back to these first people that God made, who I've described as 2 naked farmers. Like when God envisioned humanity in its best and most noble and purest form, this is what he created. 2 people who live naked lives and who were given the work or the task of farming. And so for the past 2 weeks, we've tried to see how these characteristics of the first 2 people actually still seem to exist in us. And so we spent a week talking about our need for relationships, because God made one person and they were lonely, and his answer to that loneliness wasn't to give the first person more of himself or even more work to do, it was to make another person. And we said that we're hardwired for relationships. That's why loneliness hurts so much. Last week, we spent some time looking at the idea that God made people to live naked lives. Not only were these first 2 people for a while physically naked, but they lived just transparent lives. They had no shame, they had no guilt, they had no regrets, they had no insecurity. And when God envisioned you and me, he envisioned us living that kind of existence that's just secure and innocent. And maybe we said that's why shame and insecurity cause so much damage in our lives today, because we weren't really made for that stuff. Now today we're going to look at this final characteristic, the fact that when God made 2 people, he gave them work to do. He made them farmers. And I understand that if you look at those 3 words, this may be the one that seems least appealing to some of us, right? It doesn't have the emotional pull of talking about relationships or the curiosity factor of the nakedness thing that we talked about last week. But don't sleep on this idea that God created us for purpose and for work. And that's what we want to kind of dive into today. Have you noticed, like I have, that as people, we have kind of a love-hate relationship with work? Like, there are times when work, and when I say work this morning, I just don't mean jobs and paychecks and bosses and punching a time clock, talking about having something to do that matters, right? Have you noticed that at times your work is the best part of your life or the worst part of your life? That when things are good at work, things seem to be good in a lot of other areas, or when things are bad at work, that comes home with you and it bleeds into other areas? For some of us, the most loaded question anybody asks us is, how was work today? Or what did you do today? And if we feel like we did a lot and a lot of good stuff, we feel good about ourselves. And if it didn't go well, we feel bad about ourselves. Have you ever noticed that when you've got a lot of work to do, all you want to do is get away from work? And when you don't have work to do, all you want to do is get back to work, right? Our relationship with work is a curious thing, and I think this goes straight back to the garden. Because when God made people, he made them to have purpose and to be productive and to make significant, important contributions. And so we want to go back once again to Genesis chapters 1 and 2 and see what we can learn about ourselves and our relationship with work from these first 2 people. And here's one thing we learn if we kind of noodle around in the book of Genesis chapters 1 and 2 a bit. We learn that work is good. Work is a good thing. Now, that may not be the word that you would choose to describe work this morning, but let's kind of noodle on that a little bit. I asked you this question during community time. Complete the phrase, if I didn't have to work anymore, I'd, and how many of us thought that that would be a beautiful thing, right? How many of our descriptions begin with, wow, if I just had enough money and I didn't have to work anymore. If my schedule would clear and I didn't have to work anymore. And we get dreamy-eyed and, we get really excited about envisioning a life that's just free and clear of work. Now, I do this too. In fact, here's my latest version of this. It's the 2012 giveaway of the HGTV Dream Home. Anybody else entered to win the HGTV Dream Home? Ladies, you're not going to win. It's going to be me. Let me just tell you, right? If you're not familiar, every year, Home and Garden Television builds a brand new home in a beautiful location, and they give it away to one lucky winner of the millions who enter. This year's Dream Home is in Park City, Utah. So it's surrounded by mountains. It has a bunch of property attached to it. It's got a trout stream that flows through the middle of it, just saying. It's got some fantastic outdoor spaces. And when I win this, you can all come visit, right? Yeah. So they're actually going to give this away 3 Sundays from now. And I find myself thinking, if I won, and by the way, you don't just win the house, you win kind of a decently large pile of money. If I won, what would I do about this job? How many of you could I convince to come to Park City, Utah and start Connections West out there with me, right? And thank you, Al, you can come, yeah. When I think about that, I think, man, that would be a great life. And as we think about not having to work, maybe our gut response is, well, that would be perfect. But is it? If you didn't have any work to do, would your life really be so fantastic? Some of you have lived this. I asked you during community time, have you ever been laid off or had trouble finding work? And when I asked the question, did you hear the response in the room? There was a palpable groan. Because those of us who've been in this circumstance, when we've been told, I don't need you to work anymore, or when we've put ourselves out there, I think I could contribute, I'd love to make a difference, and we're told, no, we don't really need you, it's actually painful, isn't it? I've walked with a bunch of friends in this community through this experience, and we note the same thing every time. When you've got a job and you're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, all you dream of not working. And then once people say you don't have to work, all you dream about is going back to work. Would we really be happy if we didn't have anything to do? Well, let's think about retirement. What happens when people retire? Initially, there's this great buzz of excitement, and they've got a list of things and places and people that they, when I retire, I'm going to travel, and I'm going to go see the kids, and we're going to do this. And after they blow through that list, what happens to most people? They get bored. They get on their spouse's nerves if they happen to be married. Their spouse begs them, please go back to work. You're driving me nuts around here, right? My dad retired in January, and I called a couple weeks ago just to check in, and I said, Mom, how's Dad doing? Because my dad's got a huge work ethic, and he was an up at 5, off to work, home at 6 p.m. kind of guy for a long time. I said, how's he doing? And she's like, oh, he's driving me nuts. And I'm like, just sitting around watching TV? No, he won't stop doing stuff around here. He's done more around here in 2 months that he's been retired than the last 5 years that he's lived here. Because my dad, he's worked, and now that he doesn't have to work, he still wants to work. I don't know if you've ever seen these. Have you ever heard of any of the mortality studies on people who retire early? Studies have found that the earlier you retire in life, the earlier you will die. Now, you hear that and you think that's backwards. If I could just retire, then I could have a really good life. And yet, studies show that people who retire earlier die earlier. Well, why is that? Well, maybe one reason is that work is actually a good thing for us. Yeah, work is good. Now, why do I say that? Aside from our experience with, unemployment and employment and retirement and those kinds of things, I think work is good because you and I have been created in the image of a God who works. In fact, when we started this series, we started with the teaching called The Most Productive Week Ever. And we met God in the beginning. And what is God doing in the beginning? He's working and working and working. And when you finally get to Genesis 2, this is what you read. Heaven and earth and everything in them were finished. By the seventh day, God had finished the work that he had been doing. You and I were created to work because we're made by a God who was busy, who was creative, who was productive. Now, if we talk about our roots and we talk about how we develop our temperament and our wiring and our character, we often point to our parents, right? How many of you would say, I get my work ethic from my dad, mom, grandpa? Absolutely, me too. Well, let me show you this really interesting thing that Jesus says about himself and about God in John chapter 5. He's actually accused of working on a day when they were supposed to rest. And here's just a snippet of the encounter. The Jews began to persecute Jesus because he kept healing people on the day of worship. Jesus replied to them, my Father is what? Working right now. God's always working, and so am I. Jesus said, look, I'm just doing what my Father does. He's at work, and I'm at work. And what if the same thing is true about us? You and I were made in the image of a God who is at work. In fact, let me show you Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. It's a little bit of a conversation that God has with himself about the people he's going to make. God said, let us make humans in our image and our likeness. Let them rule the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the domestic animals all over the earth, and all the animals that crawl on the earth. God says, okay, I'm going to make people, and the first thing he says about us is they're going to have work to do. I'm going to make them to be like me, so they're going to rule. They're going to be active. They're going to have a job to do. And maybe this is why work is a good thing. So in January, we ended up spending some time in the book of Ecclesiastes. If you're with us, maybe you remember that. And I want to show you one that I highlighted back in January that deals with work. It's Ecclesiastes 5:12. I'll come back to that in a second. The sleep of working people is sweet, whether they eat a little or a lot. But the full stomachs that rich people have will not allow them to sleep. Have you experienced that? You spent all day busting it, and you got sweaty, and you got dirty, or maybe just mentally exhausted, and yet when you went to bed, you felt good because you knew that you had done something, right? The sleep of working people is sweet because work is a good thing. Now, in the beginning, there are actually two descriptions of the work that God gives people to do. One's found in Genesis chapter 1, and the second is found in Genesis 2. Let me show you that one to round out this idea that we're made in God's image. Then the Lord God took the man and put him where? In the Garden of Eden to farm the land and to take care of it. Isn't that curious? Because when we dream of paradise, there's no work. Right? When you dream of just getting away and getting to the most beautiful, there's nothing to do but put your feet up and enjoy a beverage and take in the view and undo the years of stress that you've been piling on. And that's not a bad thing either, by the way. But in paradise, God intends for people to have work to do. Because although work may be a frustrating thing to us or, a word that just evokes a lot of darkness and stress, it's not to God. Work is a good thing. It's something that actually can make life better for us. And here's one example of here's what life is about. It's Ecclesiastes 5:18. At last I have seen what is good and beautiful. It's to eat and drink and to enjoy the good in all our hard work under the sun during the brief lives God gives us. This is our lot in life. You want to know what life's about? You want to know what's good and beautiful? Enjoy your work. Enjoy all the fruit of your work. Enjoy the satisfaction that comes from your work. Enjoy feeling like you made a difference. Enjoy the money that you make from your work. Enjoy all of that. Enjoy feeling tired at the end of the day because you worked hard. Work is created to be good. Now, maybe you're hearing that and you're thinking, Fred, I'd love to really believe that, but I'm just so tired. Nobody's tired this morning, right? Everybody's tired. In fact, when you ask somebody how they're doing, if they're honest, what's their response to you? I'm busy. I'm tired. Yeah. So please don't hear this and think, well, that can't be right because I'm just tired. In the beginning, there's work and there's rest, right? God works and then he rests. And so this is not, I'm not suggesting that all God made us to do is work. In fact, if we would find the right balance of work and rest, work would probably even feel better to us. And many of us struggle with that balance. That's probably another teaching or another 13 weeks of teaching on how to rest. In the beginning, there's rest and there's work. Now, something else that you may be feeling is that work just doesn't feel good to you. You would say, Fred, if you knew where I work, if you knew my boss, if you knew the politics, if you knew how little they pay me, you just quit because it doesn't work for me this morning, this talk on work being good. And if that's your experience, it probably has something to do with what happens in Genesis 3. where people's relationship with work, like everything else in the world, changes. And 2 Sundays from now, we're going to unpack that and talk about, what changed our relationship with work. But today, we just want to stick with, in the beginning, there's work, and it's good, right? This is one of the things we learn about Adam and Eve and about ourselves, is that work is good. And here's the second thing that at least I draw out of Genesis 1 and 2 as I try to understand why God asked these people to take care of the earth and farm and gave them work to do. It's not just this idea that work is good. It's that you and I are made to do good work. Right? It's not just that work is a good thing, but that God intends for us to do work that actually is good, that's significant, that fits, that makes a difference. Okay, so I asked you to think about the best, most enjoyable work you've done. Were you able to think of something? Paid or unpaid, volunteer, whatever. Just were you able to think of something where you thought, man, that was good work? It was enjoyable. It was fun. I loved it. Were you able to think of work that you didn't enjoy? Yeah, everybody. In fact, many of us, that might have been the easy part to do. Well, I don't know what job I ever enjoyed. I can tell you all the jobs I hated. Here it is, right? I don't know how you process that, but my hunch is that there are a few different ways that we decide, some filters that we run things through to decide if work is good work or not. And when I say good work, I'm not talking about quality and excellence, although I think that's all true too. I'm talking about work that's good for us, right? Not just us doing a good job or trying harder. As you processed work that was good or not good, here's some questions you might have been asking yourself. Was I capable? Could I do the job? Isn't it a lot more fun to do work that you actually are good at? Of course it is. Or that you have the potential to be good at? Now, some of the things that you thought were frustrating, one of the reasons it might have been frustrating is you thought, I'm just not cut out for this. I get that I'm supposed to go sell this stuff. I'm just not a salesperson. Or I get that I'm supposed to work on this computer, but I'm not an IT person. Or I get that they want me to fix this machine. I'm not a mechanic. It's frustrating to be asked to do work that you're not capable of doing, isn't it? Yeah. Good work at times feels like, man, I can actually do this. And not only can I actually do this, I might even be good at this. It's in my wheelhouse. This comes easily for me. Or I learn it and I make progress quickly. Have you ever experienced that? Paid or unpaid? Something where you went, wow, I'm actually kind of good at this. And maybe other people saw it before you did. And they kind of tried to herd you or shepherd you into an area that they knew you were a people person. They knew you were handy. They knew you were good with computers, maybe even before you did. Good work leaves us saying, you know what? This fits me. Like this utilizes my makeup and my strengths and my abilities. Here's another filter we run our work through to see if it's good work or not. Is it important? Is it significant? Is something at stake here? Am I being trusted with real responsibility? Now, I probably ought to say, all of us love a little bit of busy work, don't we? I mean, I love a little bit of mindless busy work. Sometimes I love nothing better than to mow my yard. You know why? Because when I'm done, I can tell exactly what I did. And I happen to spend my life working on this project with people who are on this eternal journey, and I'm not ever sure if we're making a lot of progress or, where we're at. And so to be able to go, that yard is cut, whew, that feels really good, right? Yeah, busy work feels great sometimes, but doesn't it feel really good to have somebody say, we need you to do this because this is really important. There's a lot on the line here. And I'm trusting you with this class of children. And I'm trusting you with this division in our company. And I'm trusting you because I believe you can finish this project. And I believe you, will make a difference. That it matters. Here's another filter that we run work through. Does it matter? Will I have a chance to make a difference? How many of you notice that you like to do work where you help people in one way or another? Yeah. Because no matter how frustrating, and look, helping people, I can tell you this is what I do. Helping people isn't always easy or fun. But man, when it works, wow. There's nothing like it. To know that, man, somebody's life is a little bit different. I was talking with a friend during community time, And an example that they gave of doing really good work is their volunteer work with Cub Scouts. And they said they were actually meeting with some Cub Scouts and talking about, this was a group of Cub Scouts that were getting ready to graduate from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts. And a part of the graduation was to reflect on what did you love about being a Cub Scout? And many of these scouts named experiences that they'd had with this leader that he had invested in and worked in and given himself to. And he said, man, there's nothing like that, to know that I made a difference for those kids. Now, even if you're not a people person, you probably still want to do work that you think has a chance of succeeding, right? That you can hit your numbers or move the company forward or hit the goals. Who wants to do a lot of work that isn't going to matter? And so maybe these are some of our filters. Are we made for it? Is it important? Does it make a difference? Now, interestingly, well, I don't want to give it away. Let's go back to the jobs that Adam and Eve were given and see if they hit these criteria. Then God, this is Genesis 1, 26 to 28. Then God said, let us make humans in our image, in our likeness. Let them rule the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the domestic animals all over the earth, and all the animals that crawl on the earth. So God created humans in his image. In the image of God, he created them. He created them male and female. God blessed them and said, be fertile, increase in number, fill the earth, and be its master. Here's your work. Rule the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that crawl on the earth. Does it seem that Adam and Eve were made for this work? Is it a fit? Absolutely. Because God starts with, I'm going to make you in my image. I'm dreaming, like you ever have that exercise, create your dream job. God says, I'm dreaming up work for you. Because you're like me, here's work that you're going to be capable of. Now, is this important work? I mean, sure, there's nobody else to take care of the planet. They're the only people alive at this point, but they're in charge of the whole planet. And a planet that God says again and again, it's good. It's good. It's very good. Does this work fit? Check. Is it significant? Is God showing a lot of trust in them? Check, absolutely. In fact, let me show you a poem in the Bible. This is in Psalm 8, one of the most famous poets in the Bible, a guy named King David. He takes some time apparently to reflect on this idea that God trusts us with his creation, and it just blows him away. This is Psalm 8, starting in verse 3. When I look at your heavens, the creation of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you've set in place, here's my conclusion. What's a mortal that you remember him, or the son of man that you take care of him? God, when I look at the mountains and the hummingbirds and the ocean and the whales, and then I look at me, I think, really, God? Man, I don't seem to be very special or very important next to all of that. That's just incredible. And then David doesn't stop there. He goes on to say more. You've made him, or humans, a little lower than yourself. You've crowned humans with glory and honor. You made humans rule what your hands have created. God, that's amazing that you would actually trust us with all of this. You've put everything under humans' control, all the sheep and cattle, the wild animals, the birds, the fish, whatever swims in the current of the seas. Doesn't that seem plagiarized from Genesis 1 right there? Just a little bit? I mean, apparently God's okay with plagiarism in the Bible. Here's the conclusion. Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name throughout the earth. Now, we often teach this psalm to say, you can see God's fingerprints in all of creation, and that's true. But what David is saying is when I look at the work you've given us, it makes me just think, God, you're amazing. When I look at the fact that you put us in charge of all of this, wow. Were we made for work? Sure. Is this work important? Sure. Well, that's the first job description. And here's your work, Adam and Eve. You're in charge of the whole orb. Rule it, subdue it, exercise dominion, some translations would say. You're responsible and you have authority over it. Go. Good luck with that, right? Here's the second description of work that people are given in Genesis chapter 2:15. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to farm the land and to take care of it. Okay, so you're in charge of the whole planet, but Adam, you're going to live here on this piece of ground. And what I want you to do here is to farm it and to take care of it. Now, you read this and you think, well, why? Isn't it the Garden of Eden? Doesn't it just take care of itself? Isn't that the idea of paradise, that there's no work to be done? And yet, apparently, there was. And there needed to be some work to be done. Let me show you what these terms mean. Let me give you a little bit more emphasis from the original languages. Here's the term that we translate to farm can also be translated to work or serve. Here's the work I'm going to give you. You're actually going to serve the creation that I've made. Now, they're also told to take care of the land, and if you dig into the Hebrew, you find out that the phrase actually means to exercise great care over or to guard. So, Genesis 1, you've got authority and power and dominion. You're going to rule it, and here's how I want you to use all that authority. I want you to take care of it. I want you to nurture it. I want you to protect it. I want you to serve it. Now, this seems to check the significance box, doesn't it? Adam and Eve, this land needs you to do your part. It needs protection. It needs guarding. Adam and Eve are given good work to do. And maybe that's why we find ourselves longing for the same things. Now, you've tasted this before. You've tasted work that you're good at, and you've tasted work where somebody said, it's a big responsibility, but I believe in you. You can do it. Here it is. And you've tasted work where you walked away going, man, I actually accomplished something. That felt really good. I got a small taste of some of this 2 Saturdays ago when I went to work with some folks from Connections on Habitat for Humanity. I think it was a group of 14 of us went to work on a home in East Raleigh, and this is a project that we're invested in financially as a community and with our work and our labor and our energy and our effort. And this is a home, in fact, here's a picture of the home that's being built for a single mom who's an immigrant from Kenya and her son. And this was, I think, our 3rd work day that we've been out on this home. How many of y'all have worked on this home, by the way? Yeah, a bunch of us. And I don't know that it's a great fit. I don't know that everybody who showed up for Habitat for Humanity said, I'm really good at this construction stuff. In fact, our task was to prep. They just drywalled the inside of the building. So we were to prep, prime, and begin painting the inside of this house. And we weren't all expert painters. Some of us got more paint on us than we did on the walls. So I don't know that it was a perfect fit, but I'll tell you what, we showed up and they trusted us with it. Didn't they? They said, here, you guys are painting this house. Good luck. And I'm here, and if you need help. And we went, really? I mean, this lady has to live in this house. And this is one of the reasons why the homeowners, I think, work on the houses. They're like, don't screw up my house. I got to live here. Please don't. I don't know that we were really good at it, but it was significant. And at the end of the day, our team leader rallied us around, and he said, you guys did about twice as much work as I expected you to. And we all walked away going, wow, we did something today. And this was actually our 40s and up crew. And for some reason, they let me go on the 40s and up stuff. I don't really know, because I'm 41. And so the next day, we're here on a Sunday, and those of us who happen to be here were like, are you sore? We're like, I painted overhead all day, or I had to bend down, or no, I just took a lot of ibuprofen, or whatever it was. And yet we all said, boy, I gave away a whole Saturday to do something that I might not even be good at, but I'd do it again because it was significant, and I made a difference for a single mom who's immigrated from Kenya and is trying to carve out life here for her son. And work is good, isn't it? And doing good work feels really, really good. So when God makes people, He makes 2 of them, and He creates them to live in innocence and without shame or insecurities, but He also gives them work to do. And if we really work through Genesis 1 and 2 on our own, we can walk away with this idea that work is a good thing, and that doing good work feels especially good. Now, here's an interesting thing about the work I do with our community. To stand up and talk to 50 or 80 or 150 people, I stand up here with the knowledge that we're not all in the same place with this, are we? I mean, these may be true ideas from the Bible, but then when we each take them into our lives and our circumstances and our experiences, we all hear them differently. And we all take them out into different lives that we have to live. And so I want to offer you just a couple thoughts about whether or not this feels good to you this morning, about how to go with it this week. And before I forget, let me ask the band to come, share a couple more ideas, and they'll get ready, and then we'll just move into another time of musical worship. Okay, so painting with a very broad brush. Some of us are doing work that we love right now. Paid, unpaid. We're staying home with the kids. We're helping with the grandkids. We're volunteering our time. We're in a paid work that we love. And if that's you this morning, please hear that we're incredibly happy for you. And some of us are incredibly jealous of you, but we want to be really happy for you. And if you're in a place where you're doing good work, take Solomon's advice and just enjoy it. Enjoy it. Don't overlook it. Say, man, this is a gift from God for me to do this good work. Now, others of us are in a different place, aren't we? We don't have any work, or we don't have any work that makes us feel like we have purpose. Or, we might agree that work is good, but that's not where we're living today. We're in school, and someday we're going to get that job, or this is the entry-level position, and someday, or when, man, those kids finally get out of my house, someday I'll get back to work that matters for us, right? And no matter where you are today, if this is like, yep, that's my life, or that's nothing like my life, let me offer you two thoughts, two things that you could do this week, and I can do this week, to actually make work good and to do good work. Here's the first thing you might want to consider doing this week. Get yourself a new boss. Now, you don't have to quit your job to do this, by the way. And if you're the boss, you don't have to quit and let somebody else be the boss. Here's what I mean. Stop working for yourself, and stop working for Starbucks, and stop working for Cisco, and stop working for Wake County, and stop working for your kids in your household, and start working instead for God, right? Because ultimately, He's the one who gives you the work to do in the first place. This is Colossians 3, verses 23 and 24. Whatever you do, whether you like it, whether it's a good fit, whether it feels important, whether you feel like you're moving the needle, whether you feel like you're just delaying your dream another 2 years, whatever you do it wholeheartedly as though you were working for your real master and not merely for humans. You know that your real master will give you an inheritance as your reward. It's your real master whom you are serving. You don't have to like your job, and you don't have to like your boss, and you don't have to like a season of unemployment, and yet you and I have the ability every day to show up and say, but God, I'm going to do it for you today, and I'm going to give it to you today. Like if I'm reading this right, and if I'm reading Genesis 1 right, and I may not be, work is an incredibly spiritual endeavor. If we make it, it's an act of worship. That God, I'm rolling into work today, and this is for you. And I don't even like it, but I want to do it for you today. Maybe, if we could lean into that and live into that, work would begin to feel good to us. Whether it's a fit or important, or we feel like we're moving the needle or not. Here's the second thing you might consider doing this week. Joining Jesus in His work. Because if you're one of His followers, and we may not all be, but if you are, He has work for you to do. This is a part of following, right? In fact, maybe you've seen these verses before from Matthew 28. Jesus came near and He spoke to them and He said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So wherever you go, make disciples of all nations. Baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Teach them to do everything I've commanded you. And remember that I'm always with you until the end of time. In fact, this is one of those moments where what you see in the beginning echoes later in the Bible. So in the beginning, God takes all of His authority and He gives it to Adam and Eve. And Matthew 28, as Jesus is leaving, He takes all of His authority and ministry and leaves it with His friends and says, this is now your work to carry on. I've come and I've loved and I've taught you and I've opened the doors on the kingdom, and now it's up to you. Good luck. Do some good work, right? You show people my love. You live out my message in front of them. You crack the door on the kingdom to people who are hungry for it. It's now your work to do. And by the way, Jesus thinks we're capable, apparently. In fact, He calls us in Matthew 5 light and salt. He says, that's who you are. That's your essence. You're going to make a difference. This is your work to do. And again, you may be thinking, Fred, that's not new, and maybe I'm even willing, but I have no idea how to do that. And that's okay, because I don't think Jesus needs you to have an idea on how to do it to use you. In fact, let me just offer you this. If you're willing to try this week, if you're willing to join Jesus in His work, just do this. When you go to work or school or your neighborhood or for coffee, wherever you go this week, just pray this. God, help me join you in your work. Because God's already at work. My Father's working, Jesus said. He's at work in the kids in your classroom. He's at work in your company and your coworkers. He's at work in your household and in your neighborhood. And what if you just began to pray, God, I don't know how to do it, but would you help me join you in whatever you're doing here? Would you show me? Would you lead me? Would you open the door? Would you use me? All of a sudden, your work might get even more interesting, wouldn't it? And you'd be doing work that really matters, no matter who's writing the paycheck or how much fun it